Welcome to episode 5 of the Must Know Blockchain Use Cases. We have a distinguished panel of guests here. I'd like to welcome Olga Yaroshevsky, Lucy Gazmararian, Qian, and Yifan He. And maybe before we get started on today's topic, I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourself and the company or organization you're with and what you're working on. And let me start with you, Olga.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me here today. I am head of content strategy for NexChange Group. It's a venture builder company focused on media and building thought leadership in the areas of blockchain, fintech, and AI through events. And my particular role is to organize large-scale international events, conferences on the topics such as blockchain, fintech, AI, Web3, and metaverse lately. And I master content, program, and speaking engagements for such events as Hong Kong Blockchain Week, Singapore Blockchain Week, Greater Bay Area Blockchain Week, Africa Blockchain Week. We had a very interesting conference last year, digging into African blockchain, and Meta Week lately. So my main focus was around metaverse and Web3. I was so happy to work with Lucy and Yifan at several of our previous conferences. So it's a great company to be here. I'm a journalist. I'm a PhD in an area which is non-tech related, is more of a media related. And I've been a journalist all my life, and now I find it very exciting to master content and media for such exciting area as blockchain and Web3. Thank you.
Great to have you, Olga. Lucy?
Yeah, nice to see you, Olga. And when you were talking about all the different blockchain events, indeed, I think I've been in Africa, GBA, all these different places. So really fantastic. So yeah, my name is Lucy Gazmararian. I am based in Hong Kong, and I'm the founder of a digital assets and blockchain venture fund. So we focus on early stage companies, so really finding all the exciting new businesses that are building out our new Web3 ecosystem and infrastructure. The fund invests in tokens and equity and has a focus on Asia Pacific. So yeah, it's a really exciting time. In my view, we're at the beginning of a super cycle. So happy to talk more about it.
Great. How about you, Qian?
Hello, everyone. I'm Qian. For now, I'm the tech principal of Hong Kong Macau Department in Thoughtworks, China. Actually, I have about 5 years experience in blockchain area. That's why I will give a topic around Web3, right? So nowadays, I'm quite interested in Web3. Actually, as before, I provide the blockchain kind of services to the biggest automotive company like Daimler and some commercial banks. So today, I'm appreciate joining this webinar to share my viewpoints on Web3 with you guys. Thank you.
Great. Yifan?
Hi, my name is Yifan He. I'm the CEO and the founder of Reddit Technology, and we basically it's a blockchain and a technology provider. Where we focus is infrastructure. So today, wherever I talk about the Web3 or metaverse, we see them from a technical perspective, from an infrastructure perspective. So we probably see them a little bit different from the rest of panel. But today the panel is fabulous. Okay, there's Olga from Medium and Lucy from Capital and Yanqing from Thoughtworks, focus a little bit on the application side, and we are focused on the infrastructure. So we basically cover all the angles. Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Great, good. Well, let's start off. So Web3 at a very high level. We think about Web 1, static websites starting in the early 2000s. We went to what people call Web 2, where you had user-generated content and social platforms. And now this buzzword Web 3 has really started to spread, particularly the last 9 to 12 months. But there are a lot of different definitions of it. Lucy, let me start with you. What's your definition of Web 3?
Yeah, sure. So I think if we position it versus Web 2, that can be helpful. So Web 2, indeed, it was sort of the sharing of information. It became freely available on the internet. And anyone that interacted with this information, either, creating content, as you say, or sort of being the platform that provides it, none of those participants were rewarded directly for their participation in that sort of internet of information. And then comes along Web3 with a crypto token and blockchain infrastructure. And all of a sudden, you have the ability to transfer not just information, but value around the world, instantly peer-to-peer. But not only that, because of the mechanism of a blockchain, and there are many different blockchains with many different consensus mechanisms, but the coupling of a blockchain with a token means that we're organizing ourselves on the internet in new innovative ways. And it's really revolutionizing business models. And it's doing that primarily through the token, because now a Web3 platform has tokens, and users of the platform own those tokens and therefore own a piece of the business. So it's no longer the shareholders that's more abstracted, board of directors that's really sort of owning the company. Actually, the people that are owning it and improving it and, coming up with suggestions of how it should evolve are the token holders and the owner themselves. So I think people underestimate how revolutionary that is as a concept. Web3 is sort of the enormous elephant in the room that is really going to turn a lot of businesses on their head. Even the sort of established corporate structure. We think corporations have been around forever, but they actually haven't. They too were an innovation at one point in the early 20th century. So I think we're now moving to a new way of organizing all of us globally on blockchain infrastructure. That's the key feature, but the role of tokens is really important in a way to sort of mobilize us in the most efficient way and have all our incentives aligned so that we create the most dynamic, efficient future.
Yifan, do you agree with that definition? What's your definition? You're looking at it more from an infrastructure perspective.
Yes. Actually, Lucy actually sees that from ownership, perspective through a token. But what we see token actually become first, what's the difference between traditional IT system and the blockchain? It's actually a traditional business is centralized and the back-end system, which means only you can access. Other people have no access. And if they want access, you give them rights to access, which means you can change anything you want. But a blockchain system is more like a public system. There could be hundreds of IT systems, traditional IT systems, to access the same, database, the same system. So that actually make a lot of things become transparent, and you can have much better rights to access data. You can even have technically own some data no people can access except you. So within this kind of infrastructure, you can build a token system, but this token system also can be used for ownership, function. So you can divide the ownership of any kind of application. So you have the rights to vote. But my question is, it's still, I think it's not everything, because for example, if I go to a restaurant to eat, I don't need own part of that restaurant, but I still need to go to the restaurant and pay money to them. So I think the Web3 is actually there's a new way, new public systems. It could be public chain, it could be permission chain, it could be crypto-based public chain, it could be non-crypto public chain, but they are just a shared public decentralized system, so all other IT systems can access to them. If, for example, the metaverse, right? Metaverse, it could be different games, different websites, different, everything. But when they access the same data, then just imagine how many applications they can build. They can share same events. They can share same assets. You can access them from different world, different part of a country, different part of the industry, but access the same data. So you can build wherever you want. I think to build ownership, share, or democracy, it's just part of the solution. But overall, you can actually build any kind of application you want. Make things much more transparent.
So one of the things that that I think people are reading about in the media a lot today is, hacks and people's wallets getting hacked, or you hear this term rug pull, where someone bids up the price of a cryptocurrency and then the guy disappears and takes all your money. So I guess one of the questions is, people talk about Web3 being potentially more secure, and yet we read about cyber crimes. Olga, you're in the media, so you're probably reporting on stories like this a lot. What's your view about security and Web3?
Well, first of all, going back to your first question, I agree with Yifan here that this is not limited to token economy. This is not limited to even blockchain, even though blockchain, provides those infrastructural rails to Web3, what we should call Web3. But the thing is that there's no definition yet. We can only define some maybe key features of this third generation of, internet world that we will find ourselves in maybe in 5 to 10 years, or maybe even later. So to me, the key component here is decentralization and personalization, but we'll get to it later, I guess. In terms of security, the thing is that Web3 is essentially based on the idea of a trustless model, right? So we have to trust companies to deliver the service that they promise. And Web3 essentially means that there's a possibility for us to store and, most importantly, control data, including personal data, without having to trust it with third-party services and centralized centers. And that's this is one of the biggest challenges, cybersecurity and privacy of data for metaverse in particular, right? So can you imagine a company operating in the metaverse and processing and assessing a huge amount of data using all kinds of technologies, including AI, including, all those neurosensors that could read your emotions, or maybe your personal physical medical data. So this is very sensitive. And in my opinion, the only option here is to maybe work on a set of very strict standards, right? That as an analogy with a real world, if we're talking about real world and a virtual world here, like a metaverse world, I think we will follow the footsteps of somewhat regulatory framework here. And I think what I would like to actually address this to Yifan, because I think, BSN has an enormous opportunity to be a leader and a front runner in rolling out those technological standards that will eventually help us improve the level of security and help us not only assess that data, but also control it. It maybe give a user a full control in order to maintain this trustless model that I mentioned in the beginning.
Thank you, Olga.
And not only trust new infrastructural models with it, but also give an opportunity to benefit from it and earn. That's the ideal.
Web3 comes in vested interest, you can't fight it.
Yeah, let me quickly follow up on what Olga said. First, it's first for the security issue. Tim mentioned it's actually we can actually discuss between backend centralized system with open source public system. The centralized is very secure. Okay, they only open a certain API to outside world, so it's very secure. Okay, because you cannot, even inside their system, there are a lot of bugs, a lot of things you can hack, but because it's closed, only they give you 5 APIs for you to call. There's no way you can, even there's some problem, you cannot reach them. But a public system, everything is public because there are so many APIs. For example, public chain, you can call them wherever you want, and it's all open source. You can actually open up all the codes and go through them, say, okay, there's a backdoor I can access. Then, but personally, I believe in open source. Okay, BSN International will be fully open sourced by end of this year. So when people look at, they actually help to fix that. So it makes the open source and public system much, much more secure. And it has so many advantages the closed backend system don't have. So that's why I believe, in 10 years, 20 years, there will be, there'll be regulations. Some data you cannot put in by your backend system. For example, personal data, you have to host the personal data on a public system, which is guarded by users' private key. Okay, right now, for example, for Facebook, sometimes, they access your phone number or something, they pop up windows. Do you agree? I mean, if you don't agree, can they technically use them? Of course they can. It's in their backend system. But in the future, when they want to access my phone number, they can't. They need my private key to send that request. After signing, they get probably partially on my phone number, which means if I don't agree, technically they can't. That's huge difference, those two results. Okay, so yeah. Kim.
Yeah, let me shift it over to you. Let's you mentioned some of the businesses that you're working with, building applications, working on digital transformations. What are you hearing from big businesses, big brands about Web3? What are they interested in doing? What are the opportunities that they see?
It's for me? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay. Actually, for the Web3, actually, I didn't know too much about this business model, a new business model about the Web3, but I have some experience on blockchain, especially enterprise blockchain. So for them, I would say, yeah, some scenarios in enterprise, we found some scenarios, suitable scenarios in enterprise when we try to use blockchain technology, like the supply chain finance, right? So that will leverage some kind of technology about the blockchain, like the immutability and the traceability, something like that. So you can use the core or the key features of the blockchain to enable or to empower the existing business. Okay, but nowadays I just heard some news or noticed some news from the internet. I know the Web3 is a creative area for the developer and the experts from the different areas. One cool idea, I think, I just call it as a X to earn. This is a new business model, I think. I will give you an example. What is the X to earn? So I don't know, probably you guys have heard about this company, startups, Stampen the network. This is a very amazing company because they invented a new business model that you can you can buy shoes, digital shoes, and then you just run or do the workouts at home. And their apps they provide can monitor the data from what you generate by running, by doing workouts, and then they can distribute the money, I mean the digital currency, to you. That is we call move to earn, right? So you just move and then you can earn the money. So probably in the future, in the Web3 world, we can imagine probably they will have so many things X to learn, like learn to earn, right? You just study and you can earn the money. And probably you can draw to earn. You draw a picture and to earn something, or like to earn. You just click the like button and you earn something. So that's my opinion.
Interesting. Well, as a runner, I'm interested in a model where I could get paid for for exercising. That's interesting.
There is actually an app for it, you know, they
I
sell
know.
sneakers and NFTs and you can earn where you run.
It
Can I
is an
chime in
interesting
just
model.
real quick, just to follow up on this?
Yeah, please go ahead, Olga.
One of the greatest examples of, you know, like transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3 is in the entertainment and music industry. And we touched on this during our previous conference in Dubai a lot. So what happens is there is an actual possibility for, on one hand, for artists to engage with their audience directly, to get rid of middlemen, to even get rid of the studio. You know, they can sell merchandise as NFTs, they can hold concerts in metaverse, they can sell tickets. On the other hand, there are record companies who still want to be in the game. So they need to change, they need to transition from Web 2 to Web 3. And this is amazing. And this changes a company, a record label. This changes a whole career for an artist to transition to shift from physical back to a digital asset model. And then it absolutely changes the game for a user, for an audience, for a fan, right? And same happens in Gamify. Gamify is an amazing example right now because so all that value that was locked in dominant gaming industry players previously, it is now being like redistributed among communities very fairly and through decentralized autonomous organizations too. So Gamify, DAOs, music and entertainment are the greatest use cases on how to change a business model and to do it for good. Well, for the sake of, you know, community at least.
Lucy, you're an investor, and so I'm sure you're always looking at evaluating companies and technologies and business models. What are you seeing with businesses around Web3?
Well, I mean, the X to earn is huge, right? I mean, you can take it in so many different directions. We've mentioned some of them: learn to earn, move to earn, where to earn, but really at the core of all this to earn is putting a premium on your time. And actually, that's the bit about Web3 that I really like. It's like we're moving forwards into a world where our time has a price, and the price depends on the way that we spend that time. And I think that's going to be an amazing allocation. That's why it's so capital efficient, because we're all going to do what we're best at, what we can earn the most money doing. So that's the great expression. It's so varied. You can draw pictures, you can be an artist, but you can code as well and earn. You can, be building out the blockchain infrastructure and the security to earn. You get to choose, but you're directly rewarded. That compensation. I've gone through a lifetime of discretionary bonuses at banks. And if I ever hear the word discretionary bonus ever again, it's just someone sort of magically decides what they think you should be paid based on maybe if they saw you last week and you're top of mind. That is going. And that is what's going to be very empowering. That word's thrown around a lot, but it is empowering because every minute you spend contributing to Web3, you can be rewarded for that directly. And that's a big game changer. So listen, in terms of the investment landscape, we are just at the beginning of this Web3 innovation. We're just beginning to understand how it's turning business models on its head. And so there is a ton of opportunities. The trick is, and this is certainly what I look at, is to really see who's executing. I would say that the developers are in very short supply. So I like to back teams where it's developer-led. And it's really interesting, actually, because sometimes, the developer teams that were doing all the algos at all the big hedge funds are now leaving. They were sort of the unsung heroes, even though they were making the algos work for the hedge funds. And now they're breaking out because they have the core skills to build out all these new projects. And so developer-led teams are fantastic. And I'm so excited about a number of ones I'm looking at, which, I won't go on about what I'm looking at, but it's disrupting social, it's disrupting finance, it's disrupting economics, it's disrupting education. And so, you know, you can find pockets of innovation. And also there's sort of differences around the world. You know, Asia is really, really taking to this. Like the most successful projects are the ones that can drive user adoptions really quickly and get people excited to start working on it, right? And building it out. And Asia is very well placed for that. So, you know, hence I have an Asia Pac focus. But listen, I can't even single something out. Everything is being disrupted. It's very exciting.
So on that theme, you know, one of the questions that people are talking about is will, you know, some of the Web 1 and Web 2 companies be able to be successful in a Web 3 world? And we saw last year, Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook, which is one of the biggest Web 2 companies, Meta. Right? Do we think that a big Web 2 company can be successful in Web 3? Yifan, what do you think?
First of all, let me address the 2N philosophy. It's we should issue a universal token called the live to earn, because you need to prove you are alive, then other things become available. If you don't make this token, you cannot do anything with move to earn, because you cannot, you know, that moving probably fake, because you know you're probably dead. so
Are you announcing a live to earn ICO here, Yifan?
Or maybe
no.
read to earn.
We need to develop we need to develop technology to make sure that people is alive. Okay, that's actually very complicated system, you know, to make sure. Medical system. Actually, there's a question in the chat from one of our audience. I think that's a very good question. Who will be paying you the money or incentive for doing that? Let me answer this. This is actually for all the speculative business is a future valuation paying you now. Okay, so that's basically answer that question. Like stock market, you buy stock at $1, it increases to 2. It's actually the value of the future of the company actually supporting that kind of valuation. So you're making money on the future valuation of that company. So that's actually not stock, future, you know, all those financial products actually, you know, works. And now answer Tim's question. First, because I say the Web3 is different, because I think Web3 just a new way for different Web2 system how to interact with each other. So that's my definition of Web3. Much better way. It's not calling the API to each other. You know, of course, this kind of interaction could be based on token. You know, it could be based on just sending data over, you know, share data, you know, share some information. So I think Web3 is a new infrastructure. Then eventually with this new infrastructure, all the Web2 company become Web3, part of Web3. So Web3 is the next level of internet.
But do you think that they'll be successful? Because one of the ideas about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is in Web 2, the platforms, so Google, Facebook, own your data. And in Web 3, everyone owns their own data.
It's fun. It's fun. I think they will be successful. And they have much better chance to succeed than new companies because they have 3 billion users already know them. For any Web3 company, you know, cryptocurrency company, blockchain technology, it will take them 10 years and billions of dollars, even let people know them. That's the marketing cost. So all the big Web2 companies, they already have the user. Just like, let me say this, just like Facebook last year, they decided to delay all the facial, probably over 1 billion of facial recognition data from individuals. Okay, they decide just delay that. Actually, they can do is, you know, of course, the infrastructure doesn't really support that yet, but they can choose, let the user decide. You want to move your data to a blockchain to become a public, you know, a system from their backend system and allow user to use their private key to protect their facial recognition data. Then I think some people will choose to stay. Okay, then immediately there are the large Web3 facial recognition company. So then they can open APIs, use this kind of privacy computing technology, like other company to access the user's facial recognition data. Of course, the user need to use their private key to send that request. Then immediately a new business model there. And other company just collect those facial recognition data. It takes them like 10 years or 20 years.
Interesting. Good. Let's talk about governments a little bit, because I think Olga or one of the other panelists mentioned it earlier on. Originally, blockchain as a technology kind of came out of this idea that, we couldn't trust centralized institutions. We needed everything decentralized. And yet more and more you hear governments playing a more active role in digital assets and providing regulations and guidelines. Do we think that governments will play an important role in Web3, or do we think that the private sector and entrepreneurs can do it on their own? Maybe Lucy, why don't you take that one?
Well, I've actually had hot off the press. In fact, I probably have to be careful what I say here, but it's incredible the discussions I'm having directly with regulators. They are, and I think this is where the whole world is underestimating this, big transformational shift to Web3. And where we have this shared infrastructure and what our role is on this shared infrastructure and how we can change the way we do things, regulation included. I mean, I've been saying for years when I was, speaking to all the regulators, it was more an educational piece. I think we've moved past that. They get it now. And now we're at this stage like, okay, we know we need tech capabilities. And then the more they sort of really understand, it's like, actually, guys, we got to be on a blockchain too. And guess what? We've got to run a node. Guess what? We need to do transactions on the blockchain. And this understanding that the blockchain is going to make their life way easier because you're getting access to information in real time that's transparent. You can audit it instantly, and they can have direct feed coming through to the nodes. It's almost like a sort of check layer, whether it's a regulator or an auditor or any type of sort of oversight, company or layer. They're getting that. And so they're having to now adapt to be tech companies too. And so it's extraordinary how they have suddenly sort of gone, the light bulb goes off. And so I think we're set to be very surprised by regulators in 2022. I think they're getting in on the action with blockchains. There's just so much happening in the industry. Companies like Circle now in the US are becoming banks. Stable coins, fiat is moving onto a blockchain as a native currency. And, the regulators also need to find their spot on a blockchain. So I think regulation is going to rapidly change.
So you think it's a good thing? You think regulation is needed in order to really make it go mainstream?
Definitely. Whether we need a standalone regulator or a regulatory body to do that, or whether it's actually just part of how blockchain operates, it's what we code in. And so actually it sort of negates the need for an independent external body, because actually collectively we all agree these are the checks and balances we need for a fair and equitable infrastructure layer. I'm imagining we're going to get to that point where it's going to make a lot of businesses redundant, regulators included. And if they don't adapt, then, I think it's going to be difficult. But same for the banks, they need to adapt. Same for corporations, they need to adapt. Same for regulators, they need to adapt.
And anyone else have a view on regulation?
Yeah, I wouldn't agree on regulating the Web3 because, well, ideally for like an adequate regulation to be placed, there should be a dialogue, and Web3, in my understanding, successfully provides like more transparent conversation here. However, how can authorities regulate the Web3 services themselves, right? Rather than like users of it. And if users, let's say, form a huge or 1,000 millions of decentralized autonomous organizations, what will regulators do, right? And I think there's like a two-way road to it. There's like a Web3 infrastructure that Web2 companies will eventually adapt, and they will have to do it. And this can be regulated, but user experience cannot be regulated, right? They cannot regulate those that reward program, Lucy, that you mentioned, right? What they will tax you for your rewards, or what would happen, right? And one of the great examples of that dialogue, by the way, it happened I think last week about that. Like there was somewhat 40 crypto companies that sent a huge letter to the EU regulators, including like blockchain.com and Bitstamp, and the letter actually mentioned, and they want Web3 to flourish in Europe. So like the adoption of that Web3 solutions as a service and regulating all of this would like make almost impossible for European citizens to go to that mass adoption. So I think what will happen eventually is that regulators will find some spot here, maybe again in an open source space, maybe again it will work out with some kind of a self-sovereign ID.
Olga, we lost you there for a second.
Avoid it. Oh, I'm sorry. Exactly.
You were breaking up just a second. Go. Okay.
Hi, Tim. So let me just jump in.
Please jump in, Yifan.
First, I really truly believe all the governments, all the regulatory bodies, they will love Web3. Okay, they will big supporter of Web3. What's the problem with Facebook now? You know, the Congress, you know, already have several hearings with Facebook because they have no idea how they use user data, because it's everything in their backend system. So that's why I said before, it's there will be a lot of regulations to regulate certain data storage and activity must be on blockchain, must be on public system. You cannot put them into the backend system anymore. In 10 years, I think in 5 years, you will see that kind of regulation. You know, just imagine it's, for example, I always make an example in China with lottery system. Lottery system, nobody trusts the lottery system in China because everything is calculated, randomized back-end system. I said, okay, you probably just put your father's phone number there, run the program, and your father got the lottery. Nobody trusts it. Why? Because everything is in back-end system. Just imagine you build the national support lottery in a blockchain from issuing, you know, one round of lottery, you're buying it, and you can verify from a third party to make sure you truly bought that. Okay, and you know, you can see how many is there, and when they really open lottery, it's basically a random. You know, there's you know, some kind of calculation based on random numbers. So it's in a smart contract, open source. Everybody know how that works. You know, then you use your private key to claim the price. You know, everything is on an open system. Trust me, if this will be realized in China, the sales will like 10 times, because now most people be okay, it's fully transparent. I want to buy. You know, it's so just imagine this kind, yeah, this kind of Web2 business become a Web3. It changes everything. It changes everything, but it's transparent. You can really truly own the lottery ticket you own. Okay, it's not like you lose it or something. You know, so it actually it will change hundreds, thousands of industries like this, and the government love it because they can check data all the time. How that happened, where that goes, who can access. So I think the government will be big supporter of Web3.
Yeah, I agree with Yifan. Actually, yeah, we can use the technology and this blockchain to do the regulation things. Like, you know, the smart contract can provide some functionality to do the audit and something related to the regulation. So from the tech perspective, we can also use some kind of technology of Web3 to help the area of regulation. And also, I think the regulation is necessary for Web3. Back to 20 years ago, I think there are a group of people who really love to think the the Web 2 or the internet will be a free space for them to do everything, right? Democracy kind of things. But actually, after 20 years, we can know that this space really need to do regulation things. Cause I think the tech could be a evil. So you need to let someone, the observer or the government, to help you to defeat these bad things. So regulation is necessary for the Web3. Yeah, that's my point.
Well, I want to take a couple questions that we're getting from the audience right now. One is, how can large corporations be successful moving from a Web 2 world to a Web 3 world? So Lucy, let me start with you, because I know you're talking to a lot of different companies as an investor, and what guidance and advice do you give them?
I mean, I think the starting point, the challenge is the fact that corporations have shareholders. They are the owners of the business. In Web3, we've been talking about how the owners are the users. And that's why, even though they need to, as Yifan said, go about the marketing and maybe get all their users and user adoption, corporations have a different challenge. And that is sort of breaking down the sort of corporate governance structure to be able to accommodate Web3 and the decision-making process. I mean, really, not Web2, I mean, just corporations, right? A bureaucratic infrastructure runs so deep in their DNA. And I think that's the greatest challenge. Even if you have, in any corporation, they typically have their venture division, which normally is the division of the company that sort of no one listens to. And they sort of go around doing presentations and nothing happens, and they have all these ideas. And the reason why nothing happens is because the interests of, the owners of different business units is to drive profits, and it's not really to innovate. And so this requires huge innovation that if they're doing a transition and changing the whole structure might not be profitable in the short term. And again, that's where there's this friction with shareholders. So I think that's probably the hardest obstacle to overcome. I think, case in point, Meta, this is where we talk about sort of Facebook's Web 2 metaverse, and then the open metaverse that is far more sort of, open source and really leveraging all the innovation that just exists at grassroots level all across the world. Now, yes, Facebook has 3 billion captive users, but the excitement and vested interests and innovation of Web3, where anyone can participate just by opening a wallet and sort of applying themselves, I think those users, are going to give these corporations a run for their money. So you've got this sort of difficulty, and the jury's out as to whether corporations are going to be able to adapt. I mean, we've seen a lot of headlines with big banks making moves into the metaverse. So HSBC, PwC, Standard Chartered, JP Morgan, they're sort of opening client lounges in the metaverse, but that doesn't make them a native Web3 company because they buy a plot of land and then sort of stick a portrait up of Jamie Dimon in the lounge. It's going to take way more than that. But the other thing, apart from shareholders, I think is the biggest challenge, is how to incentivize employees to actually work and move towards Web3. Because if they don't create a token economy where people literally work to earn, or they should have, here's a new business idea, convert a corporation to Web3 and you should be paid for that. These discretionary bonuses are just not going to cut it. Developers in Web3 are earning north of $900,000 in some cases. The demand for building out this new economy is extraordinary, and corporations cannot compete for talent. So one, they need the shareholders on board. Two, they need to somehow incentivize people to do this for them, because no longer does a CEO in a boardroom get to make decisions and then it happens. That model's broken. You now have to directly incentivize people to build things for you. And without a token or without direct compensation for the time they spend doing it, it's going to be very difficult. And again, shareholders may or may not understand that.
Good, interesting. What do you think, maybe Olga, I'll direct this one to you. What do you think is going to make Web3 go mainstream? When we're all talking about it on this panel, all of us are involved in this industry, but when when are the mainstream users going to, be, engaging with services in Web3?
Well, to maybe follow up a little bit on the previous question, I think for a large corporation to be successful in that movement, I think one of the best things is to just shift the focus from corporate structures to users and community, because Web3 essentially, maybe there is no need to shift from Web2 to Web3. Maybe you don't want to be a Web3 corporation here, right? And we're seeing that with Facebook. Well, in my understanding, it will go mainstream naturally, because when you give users control over their data, when you give them back, when you give that control back, right? When you eliminate middlemen and you let creators, content creators, artists to earn directly, right, without having to trust their art and their art pieces with some third-party services. When you give an opportunity to interact directly with different audiences, maybe that will just happen through a community. And there is an opinion, by the way, that there maybe cryptocurrencies or tokens would not even have to be involved in this process, right? In the true Web3, and they would not be necessary, right? And I think, well, the biggest news about Twitter, we all know, right? What happened several hours ago, I would say. But interestingly, a week ago, Twitter partnered with Stripe, and they are putting payouts on crypto rails, right? So now content creators and users on Twitter are able to receive funds directly to their wallets, right? So that eliminates any middleman, and it doesn't involve any corporation. So I think it will happen naturally. It will happen through a community effort.
Yifan, what do you think? When is it going to go mainstream and how?
Just like I said, it's just next generation of internet. So entire internet will become Web3, and all the websites will become part of Web3. And there will be, enormous number of new business model, technical model emerge. The token will be major part of that, and there will be other kind of, business built on this kind of communication, between different websites, between different games, between different, metaverses. So I believe everything will be part of Web3. Internet will become a Web3 based.
So I'm going to put you on the spot though with a timeline. Is that this year? Is that in 5 years? Is that in 10 years? What do you think?
In 10 years, you will see. Personally, I love to give numbers. Okay, so I think in 10 years, 10% of the websites will become Web3 based. 10%. That's websites. Okay, now we have like 1 billion websites. That's 10%. Website. I think in 20 years, there basically everything will be based Web3.
Okay.
Interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt. I think it's also a question of different generations stepping into this world. See, so boomers are very cautious, and then there's Gen Z, and then there are youngsters like Alpha generation. They're already there. So when they grow up, I think they'll make it happen.
Yeah, and when I say that it's still from infrastructure kind of perspective, because actually end user doesn't even know, just say, oh, there's so many more functions today, and okay, it's much easier to communicate with other people, to exchange assets, to pay each other, much easier. For them, it's just application, but actually behind those applications, it's become much efficient, communication layer on internet to make everything, new business model happen. Like a conference call, like today, why we can do this Zoom. 20 years ago, there's no Zoom because the infrastructure changed.
I think you're right, Yifan. I think one indicator of it going mainstream will be when people stop talking about the technology. It's like, 20 years ago, people talked about streaming content on IP networks using digital right management to protect it. No one talks like that anymore. They talk about, is Netflix better than Disney Plus?
Yes,
And what's the new
exactly.
show, right?
Exactly.
And so I think that will be the definition of when things really go mainstream.
Yeah.
I've got one last question here from the audience here, and it's about the banking sector. And what strategies and factors are to be considered when large banks should choose to shift to blockchain technology? Lucy, you're an ex-banker.
Yeah. Listen, I think banks have a lot going for them. They can start phasing in some kind of solutions for the market. We're not Web3 yet, right? It is not completely there at this moment. So actually there is, quite a lot of opportunity for banks to, for example, custody crypto. What are banks there for? They're supposed to safekeep your assets, right? So they can custody crypto, and that's also helping clients because they have a demand to hold crypto. Then they can offer sort of crypto products from an investment perspective, trading perspective. You can do that now through derivatives. You don't actually have to take ownership of underlying crypto or worry about that. But you can start offering investment services on derivatives market, which is the route Goldman's going, or you can actually start with becoming a sort of crypto native bank, like some of the new ones coming out of Switzerland and Singapore. That are actually sort of holding crypto and direct crypto strategies. But I think banks have one amazing thing going for them, and that's licenses. And those are the name of the game right now, because we have moved so far into securities. Everything is becoming a security. All these tokens we're talking about, I mean, you're just pinging off securities laws left, right, center. Everyone's in violation practically if you're experimenting with Web3. And so I would say the banks really have that going for them. And if they innovate and work with the industry and use those licenses in the right way, they can really, build a moat around their business. And, I think the US gets that actually. They're starting to say to all the banks, you can custody crypto now. That's part of the, instruments that you can actually safekeep for clients. You can start interacting with stable coins on a blockchain. They're sort of encouraging all banks to get on chain. And so as this sort of regulated licensed entity on chain, as we sort of transition to a chain where maybe we don't even need those players anymore, there's still a lot of business to be done there. So I'm actually relatively optimistic for forward-thinking banks in the near term, if they get their skates on.
Well, I want to thank all of you. We're just about out of time here. I want to thank you all for the discussion. It was a great discussion, and I appreciate everyone bringing their own perspective to it. So thank you once again, Olga, Lucy, Yifan, and Yan. And looking forward to having each of you on a future episode of the Must Know Blockchain Use Cases.